The Galactic Council chamber was larger than most cities on Earth. Thousands of lights shined from the giant ceiling high above. Long silver banners of alien empires hung beside enormous pillars made from black stone. The room was filled with creatures from every corner of the galaxy. Some were tall and thin with glowing blue eyes. Some looked like giant insects covered in armor. Others floated above the floor, inside glass, spheres filled with green liquid. At the center of the chamber stood one single human, Admiral Ethan Cole. He stood straight in his dark navy uniform, while thousands of alien eyes stared at him. Some watched with hate. Most watched with amusement. The humans had become the galaxy's favorite joke. For 20 years, Earth had tried to become part of the Galactic Council peacefully. Humans traded resources, shared science, and helped weaker colonies survive pirate attacks. But no matter what humanity did, the older alien races never respected them. To the galaxy, humans were young, weak, easy to control. And today, the Council planned to remind humanity of its place. A loud metallic sound echoed across the chamber as the Council speaker entered. Speaker Verex. The massive reptilian leader slowly walked toward the central throne. His dark red scales reflected the chamber lights like blood. 2 armed guards followed behind him carrying long plasma staffs. The entire chamber became silent. Verex sat down and looked directly at Ethan. "Admiral Cole," he said in a cold voice, "Earth has ignored the Council's orders for the final time." A giant hologram suddenly appeared above the chamber. Several human colonies glowed red on the map. "The outer human systems now belong to the Council," Verex continued. "Your species will remove all military forces immediately." Whispers spread through the chamber. Everyone already knew the truth. Those colonies were rich in rare minerals. The Council wanted them badly. Ethan remained calm. "They are human colonies," he answered firmly. "The people living there chose independence under Earth's protection." Several alien senators laughed openly. One of them, a pale-skinned alien from the Ceruvian Empire, leaned forward with a smile. "Protection?" he mocked. "Human ships can barely defend their own borders." More laughter followed. Ethan said nothing. Verex narrowed his eyes. 3 days ago," the speaker continued, "human forces attacked Council mining operations near the Vega sector." "They were illegal mining operations," Ethan replied. "They were Council property. They were stealing from human citizens." The chamber erupted into angry noise. Alien representatives shouted over one another. "Humans are becoming aggressive. They should be punished. Earth must surrender its fleets." Verex raised one claw, and silence returned instantly. Then another hologram appeared. This time, the room became quiet for a different reason. Burning cities, destroyed human stations, dead civilians lying beneath broken buildings. Ethan's jaw tightened. 3 colonies, over 2 million human civilians dead. The Council had called it a peace operation. The galaxy called it a warning, but humanity called it murder. Verex looked down at Ethan without emotion. These losses happened because Earth refused cooperation. Several alien senators nodded calmly. To them, human lives meant little. Ethan slowly looked around the chamber. Thousands of alien faces stared back at him. None showed guilt. None showed regret. Only arrogance. One senator suddenly stood. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, covered in heavy battle armor. General Croft of the Dravian war clans. "The Council has wasted enough time," Croft growled. "Humans are weak. Their fleets are small. Crush Earth now before they become a larger problem." Loud agreement echoed through the chamber. Ethan finally spoke again. "You believe humanity is weak because we chose peace." Croft laughed loudly. "No," the general replied. "We believe humanity is weak because you fear war." The chamber exploded with laughter again. Even Verex smiled slightly. But Ethan did not react. His expression remained calm. That calmness slowly made the room uncomfortable. Verex leaned forward. "You stand alone here, Admiral," he said quietly. "Earth has no allies left. No fleets near Council space. No power to resist us." Ethan looked directly into the speaker's eyes. "Are you certain about that?" Verex frowned slightly. Before he could answer, a loud alarm suddenly echoed through the chamber. Every senator looked around in confusion. Then another alarm began, and another. Red warning lights flashed across the massive hall. Council officers rushed toward their stations. "What is happening?" Varric shouted. A terrified operator looked up from his console. Unknown ships entering core space. The chamber instantly became chaotic. "That's impossible. No fleet can enter Council territory undetected." Another officer spoke, his voice shaking. "There are hundreds of them." A holographic screen suddenly activated above the chamber. The entire room froze. Dark warships were emerging from hyperspace near the Council capital. Human warships. But these ships looked nothing like normal Earth vessels. They were massive. Black armored hulls covered their bodies like steel shadows. Blue energy burned across strange symbols painted on their sides. Their engines glowed like bright stars in the darkness. Even worse, there were thousands of them. Complete silence filled the chamber. Ethan finally broke it. "For 20 years," he said calmly, the galaxy laughed at humanity. The human fleet moved closer on the holographic display. Council defense stations opened fire. The human ships did not stop. Bright beams of blue light suddenly shot from the human fleet. Entire defense platforms exploded instantly. Gasps filled the chamber. One alien senator whispered in horror, "What are those weapons?" More emergency reports flooded the room. Council Fleet 6 destroyed. Defense grid collapsing. Human ships approaching the intersectors. Panic spread everywhere. Some senators tried to run. Others screamed orders into communication devices. Varric stood from his throne in fury. "How does Earth possess this technology?" he roared. Ethan looked at the terrified chamber around him. Then he answered quietly. "Because while the galaxy spent years mocking humanity, the hologram showed another Council fleet exploding into fire. Humanity was preparing. At that exact moment, the giant doors of the Council chamber exploded inward. Smoke filled the room. Alien guards raised their weapons. The Galactic Council chamber remained frozen in silence. Smoke drifted slowly through the shattered entrance, while human soldiers stood like dark statues beneath the flashing red alarms. No one dared move. No one dared speak. For the first time in galactic history, the rulers of the galaxy were afraid. Admiral Ethan Cole calmly stepped forward as the human soldiers secured the room. Speaker Varric's claws tightened around the armrests of his throne. "You planned this," he hissed. Ethan looked at him coldly. "No," he answered. "Humanity prepared for this." Outside the massive chamber windows, bright explosions lit the darkness of space. The battle above the Council capital had already begun. Alien senators rushed toward holographic screens as terrifying reports filled the room. Defense Station 12 destroyed. Human fleets entering inner orbit. Council Fleet 4 is retreating. Panic spread quickly. That single word shocked everyone. Retreating. Council fleets never retreated. For centuries, the Galactic Council ruled the stars through fear. Entire civilizations surrendered the moment Council warships entered their systems. But today was different. Today the hunters had become the hunted. Varric turned toward Ethan with burning rage in his yellow eyes. "You hid an entire military empire from the galaxy." Ethan stayed silent for a moment. Then he slowly looked around the chamber. "You never cared enough to truly look at humanity," he said quietly. The room became silent again, and Ethan began telling them the truth. 22 years earlier, during humanity's first contact with alien life, Earth had celebrated. People believed the galaxy would welcome them peacefully. At first, things looked hopeful. Trade agreements were signed. Science was shared. Human colonies expanded across nearby systems. But behind the smiles and diplomacy, the Council saw humanity as a future threat. Humans learned too quickly, adapted too quickly, fought too fiercely. So the Council secretly limited human expansion while pretending to be allies. Every request from Earth was delayed. Every human discovery was monitored. And every military project was restricted. At first, humanity obeyed. Then came the attack on New Damascus Colony, a peaceful human world near the edge of Council space. Officially, pirates destroyed the colony. But Earth later discovered the truth. The pirates had been hired by Council leaders. Over 300,000 humans died. Children, families, entire cities burned from orbit, and the Council called it an unfortunate accident. Ethan still remembered the day he walked through the ruins. Bodies covered the streets. Smoke filled the skies for weeks. That was the day humanity stopped trusting the galaxy. Secretly, Earth began preparing, not for revenge, for survival, deep inside unexplored regions beyond known space. Hidden shipyards were built inside dead planets and frozen moons. Entire fleets were constructed in darkness. Human scientists worked without sleep for years. New engines, new weapons, new armor. Technology far beyond anything the Council believed humanity could create. But the greatest human weapon was not technology. It was patience. While alien empires fought each other over territory and power, humanity quietly evolved. Every insult was remembered. Every betrayal was recorded. Every attack strengthened humanity further. And now the waiting was over. One nervous alien senator suddenly pointed at Ethan. "You expect us to believe humans built all this in secret?" Ethan looked directly at him. "No," he answered calmly. "I expect you understand how badly you underestimated us." Before anyone could respond, another violent explosion shook the chamber. The holographic battle map flickered wildly. Human fleets were moving closer toward the Council core, and they were unstoppable. The senators watched in horror as dark human warships cut through Council defenses like blades through paper. Council plasma cannons barely damaged the black armored ships. Meanwhile, human weapons destroyed entire fleets with terrifying precision. General Croft stepped toward the hologram in disbelief. That technology should not exist. Ethan glanced toward him. "You spent centuries building bigger weapons," he said. "Humanity focused on building smarter ones." Suddenly, a communication officer rushed into the chamber. His face was pale with fear. "Speaker Verax," he stammered. "Multiple Council worlds are surrendering." The room exploded into chaos. "Surrendering? That's impossible." "Without permission?" But the officer continued. "They believe the war is already lost." Cold silence followed his words. For the first time, many senators realized something terrifying. Humanity had not launched a simple attack. This was a complete military takeover, and Earth had planned it for years. Far above the planet, the battle intensified. Human strike fighters moved through space with impossible speed, destroying Council carriers one after another. Massive alien battleships burned across the stars. Emergency broadcasts spread across the galaxy. Every species watched the war live, and everywhere, fear began spreading. Because humanity was not fighting like conquerors. They were fighting like survivors who had finally decided enough was enough. Inside the chamber, Verax slowly sat back down on his throne. For the first time since becoming speaker, uncertainty appeared in his eyes. "You could have negotiated," he said quietly. Ethan stared at him. "We tried." Verax said nothing, because he knew it was true. Humanity had asked for peace many times. The Council answered with threats. Humanity asked for equality. The Council answered with humiliation. Humanity asked for justice after their colonies were destroyed. The Council answered with silence. Now humanity was answering back, and the galaxy could not stop them. A sudden transmission appeared on the central screen. Every person in the chamber turned toward it. A human commander appeared wearing black military armor. "Admiral Cole," the officer reported, "Council Fleet 7 has fallen. Orbital defenses are under our control." The chamber fell completely silent again. Fleet 7 was one of the Council's strongest fleets. Destroyed in less than an hour. The officer continued. "Human forces are waiting your next orders, sir." Ethan looked around the frightened chamber one final time. Thousands of alien leaders stared back at him, with fear replacing arrogance. The same beings who once mocked humanity now looked completely helpless. Ethan finally gave the order. Across the galaxy, millions of screens showed the same terrifying image. Human warships moving through Council space. World after world watched in complete silence as the unstoppable Black Fleet advanced deeper toward the galactic core. No one understood how humanity had become this powerful. Not even the Council's greatest military minds. Inside the council capital, fear spread faster than fire. Emergency sirens echoed through every tower. Military officers ran through crowded halls, carrying reports filled with disaster after disaster. Entire fleets were gone, defense stations destroyed, outer systems lost contact, and still, the human fleet kept coming. Deep beneath the council chamber, inside a heavily guarded war room, Speaker Varix gathered the remaining military leaders. The massive holographic map in the center of the room glowed red. Human forces were everywhere. General Cross slammed his armored fist onto the metal table. "This is impossible," he roared. "No species could hide this many ships." No one answered, because everyone inside the room secretly feared the same thing. Maybe humanity had become far stronger than the galaxy realized. Varix looked toward the hologram carefully. "Where's their main fleet heading?" he asked. A nervous officer swallowed hard. "Toward the Orion Gate, Speaker." The room instantly became quiet. Even Cross stopped moving. The Orion Gate was the most important military location in the galaxy. It connected the inner core worlds to hundreds of major systems. Whoever controlled the gate controlled galactic travel itself. And guarding it was the Council's most powerful fleet, the Iron Dominion. Over 12,000 warships, thousands of defense cannons, elite soldiers from the strongest alien races. For nearly 2 centuries, the fleet had never lost a battle. If the humans wanted the Orion Gate, they would die there. At least that was what the Council hoped. Meanwhile, far from the capital, Admiral Ethan Cole stood aboard the human flagship Resolute. The bridge was dark except for glowing blue screens and tactical displays. Human officers worked calmly around him while the fleet traveled through hyperspace. Unlike the panicked Council forces, the humans showed no fear. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. A young officer stepped beside Ethan. "Sir, we are approaching the Orion sector." Ethan nodded slowly. "Any movement from the Iron Dominion?" "Yes, sir. They're preparing defensive formations around the gate." The officer hesitated slightly. "Sir, our scouts report over 12,000 enemy ships." Several younger crew members looked nervous. The Iron Dominion's reputation terrified even experienced soldiers. Ethan noticed their expressions. Then he calmly spoke to the entire bridge. 20 years ago," he said quietly, "the Council burned our colonies and called it peace." The room became silent. They believed fear would control humanity forever. He looked toward the massive star map ahead. "Tonight, we teach the galaxy something new." The human crew straightened immediately. Confidence returned to their faces, because every soldier aboard the fleet trusted one thing completely. Humanity was ready. Hours later, the human fleet exited hyperspace near the Orion Gate, and even the human officers fell silent at the sight before them. Thousands of alien warships filled the darkness like a steel wall stretching across space. Gigantic battlecruisers floated beside massive defense platforms. Endless rows of plasma cannons aimed directly at the approaching humans. At the center of the formation stood the Dominion flagship Wrath of Kings, a ship nearly 20 kilometers long. General Croth himself commanded the defense. Inside his command bridge, Croth stared at the approaching human fleet with burning hatred. "So," he growled, "the humans finally arrived." An officer beside him looked nervous. "Sir, their ships are not slowing down." Croft smiled darkly. "They won't survive long enough to stop." Throughout the alien fleet, weapons powered up. Millions of soldiers prepared for battle. Then something strange happened. The human fleet stopped moving. Far away from the battle line, the black warships floated silently in space. No attacks. No communication. Nothing. Croft frowned. What are they doing? Suddenly, one of the officers shouted in panic. Energy spike detected. Before anyone could react, the space behind the human fleet began glowing blue. Then more ships appeared. And more. And more. Entire human fleets emerged from hyperspace behind the first fleet. Hundreds. Then thousands. The darkness of space became filled with black warships. The alien officers stared in horror. Croft's face slowly lost all color. "This," he whispered. "This cannot be real." The humans had hidden even more fleets. The Council's intelligence had failed completely. Admiral Ethan Cole stood silently aboard the Resolute, while endless human warships filled the stars around him. This was humanity's true military strength. The fleet built in secret. The fleet prepared for the worst day in human history. And today, that day had arrived. The communication channels suddenly opened. General Croft appeared on the screen. His voice was filled with anger. "You hid this from the entire galaxy." Ethan looked at him calmly. The galaxy never cared enough to notice. Croft slammed his fist onto his console. "You think these ships will save humanity?" Ethan answered quietly. "No." He looked directly into Croft's eyes. "They will end this war." Before Croft could respond, Ethan gave the order. "Advance!" The human fleet moved forward instantly. Then hell exploded across space. Thousands of alien cannons fired together, turning the darkness into burning light. But the human ships kept moving. Blue energy shields absorbed wave after wave of enemy fire. Then the humans attacked. Bright beams cut across space with terrifying precision. Entire alien destroyers exploded instantly. Defense stations shattered apart like glass. Human strike fighters rushed between larger ships, targeting weak points with impossible speed. The battle became chaos. Explosions covered the Orion sector. Burning ships drifted everywhere. Alien commanders screamed desperate orders, while human fleets pushed deeper into the defense line. And slowly, the impossible began happening. The Iron Dominion started losing. Croft watched in disbelief as one of his battle cruisers split in half from a human energy blast. "No," he whispered. For the first time in centuries, fear entered his heart. The Orion Gate burned like a dying star. Broken warships drifted through space in endless fields of fire and metal. Explosions flashed across the darkness, while emergency signals echoed from damaged fleets. For 2 centuries, the Iron Dominion had protected the Galactic Council. Now it was collapsing in a single night. Human warships pushed through the battlefield without stopping. Their black armored hulls moved between the burning wrecks like shadows hunting prey. Across the galaxy, billions watched the battle live. And for the first time in history, the galaxy was afraid of humanity. Inside the command bridge of the Wrath of Kings, chaos spread everywhere. Warning alarms screamed nonstop. Smoke filled parts of the bridge after several direct hits. Officers shouted desperate reports over one another. Defense Line 3 destroyed. Human fighters inside the carrier zone. "We are losing power on the left wing cannons." General Cross stood frozen before the giant battlefield screen. He could not believe what he was seeing. The Iron Dominion was supposed to be unbeatable, but the humans were tearing through it piece by piece. And worse, the humans were fighting like they had already accepted death. Damaged human ships continued attacking even while burning apart. Fighter pilots crashed directly into enemy carriers to protect their fleets. Boarding soldiers fought room by room without retreating. The alien commanders had never seen anything like it. Most species fought to survive. Humans fought to win. A loud explosion shook the Wrath of Kings violently. Several officers crashed onto the floor. Direct hit on the lower reactor. Croft grabbed the command table to steady himself. "Where's their flagship?" he roared. An officer pointed toward the center of the hologram. The room became silent. The human flagship Resolute was moving directly through the battlefield toward them. Nothing was stopping it. Every ship that attacked, it was destroyed within seconds. Blue energy weapons cut through heavy armor like paper. Entire destroyers exploded before even reaching firing range. Croft stared at the screen with growing fear. Humanity had changed warfare itself. Meanwhile, aboard the Resolute, Admiral Ethan Cole stood calmly while battle reports filled the bridge. Unlike the alien fleets, human formations moved with perfect coordination. Every ship protected the others. Every attack had purpose. Years of secret training had transformed humanity into something the galaxy never expected: a war machine. A communications officer suddenly looked toward Ethan. "Sir, incoming transmissions from multiple outer systems." Ethan nodded. "Report." The officer hesitated slightly. "Several alien worlds are surrendering voluntarily." Another officer looked shocked. "Their surrender without a fight?" The communications officer nodded. They believe resistance is pointless now. Silence filled the bridge. Humanity's attack was spreading fear faster than the war itself. Entire civilizations were already choosing surrender over destruction. But Ethan showed no pride on his face, only sadness, because this war should never have happened. Humanity had begged for peace for years. The galaxy answered with arrogance. Now the price was finally coming due. Suddenly, another transmission arrived. This one carried emergency priority. The bridge lights dimmed as a hologram activated. A frightened human governor appeared on the screen. "Admiral Cole," she said quickly, "we receive reports from the Vega colonies." Ethan's expression darkened immediately. The Vega colonies. The same colonies the Council attacked years earlier. "What happened?" he asked quietly. The governor swallowed hard. "Retreating Council forces are attacking civilian areas during withdrawal." The bridge became silent. Even the crew stopped moving. "Casualties?" Ethan asked. The governor lowered her eyes. "Thousands already confirmed dead." A cold anger slowly filled the bridge. Several officers clenched their fists. One young pilot whispered softly, "They're murdering civilians again." Ethan stared silently at the screen for several long seconds. Then he finally spoke. "Send immediate evacuation support." "Yes, sir." "And inform every human fleet." His voice became colder. "There will be no retreat for the Council forces responsible." The transmission ended. Around the bridge, the crew understood exactly what that meant. Humanity's patience was finally ending. Back inside the Council capital, panic had become uncontrollable. Senators ran through crowded halls trying to escape the planet. Military ships launched from emergency stations every minute. Some leaders attempted secret negotiations with Earth. Others simply fled. The mighty Galactic Council was falling apart. Inside a secured bunker deep beneath the capital, Speaker Varix watched the disaster unfold on massive screens. His face looked darker than ever. "You told me humanity was weak," one senator shouted angrily. "You told us they feared the Council." Varix slowly turned toward him. "They did fear us," he answered quietly. The senator shook his head. "No," he whispered. "They fear becoming like us." The room became silent, because deep inside, many of them now understood the truth. Humanity had not started this war. The Council did. Years of greed, years of cruelty, years of humiliation. And now the galaxy was finally paying for it. An officer suddenly rushed into the bunker. "Speaker Varix, emergency report." Varix looked up sharply. "What now?" The officer looked terrified. "The Orion gate has fallen." Silence. Complete silence. Several senators slowly sat down in shock. Some looked physically sick. The Orion gate was the heart of galactic control. Without it, the Council could no longer defend the core systems. Humanity now had a direct path toward the capital itself. Varix closed his eyes for a moment. For the first time in his life, he realized the Council might actually lose. Suddenly, another transmission appeared on the main screen. Admiral Ethan Cole, the human commander, stared directly into the bunker through the hologram. Behind him, human officers moved calmly across the bridge of the Resolute. Varix narrowed his eyes. "What do you want, human?" Ethan answered without emotion. The galactic core had never known fear. For thousands of years, the central worlds of the Council stood untouched behind endless fleets, massive defense stations, and powerful armies. The richest planets in the galaxy lived there. Giant cities covered entire worlds. Towers reached above the clouds, while millions believed the Council would rule forever. But now, panic filled every street. Emergency sirens echoed through the skies of the capital planet. Civilian ships crowded the spaceports trying to escape. Banks closed. Military checkpoints appeared across every district. And above the planet, the stars themselves had begun disappearing behind their rival humanity's fleet. Thousands of black warships surrounded the capital like a storm. Inside homes, offices, and crowded shelters, billions stared at the live broadcast with fear. The humans had reached the heart of the galaxy, and nothing stood in their way anymore. Far above the capital world, Admiral Ethan Cole stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the enormous planet slowly rotate beneath him. The lights of giant cities glowed across the surface. Once, Humanity dreamed of standing beside the council peacefully. Now humanity had come as conquerors. A young officer stepped beside him carefully. "Sir, final defense fleets are forming near the capital." Ethan nodded. "Numbers? Approximately 8,000 warships remaining." Several bridge officers exchanged nervous looks. Even after losing so much, the council still had enough firepower to destroy planets. This final battle would decide the fate of the galaxy. Another officer suddenly looked up from her station. "Sir, we are receiving distress signals from inside the capital." Ethan frowned slightly. "Civilian?" "Yes, sir. Massive riots and evacuations across multiple sectors." The bridge became quiet. Humanity came for the council leadership, not innocent civilians. But war never stayed clean for long. Ethan stared silently at the planet for several seconds. Then he gave a calm order. "Open humanitarian corridors near the eastern orbit." Several officers looked surprised. "Sir, allow civilian ships to escape safely," Ethan said. "Any human vessel attacking civilians will answer to me personally." The officers nodded immediately. That single order spread quickly across nearby systems. And for many alien civilians watching the war unfold, confusion began replacing fear. The humans were not slaughtering innocent worlds. They were targeting only military forces and council leadership. Humanity was showing restraint, something the council never showed Earth. Meanwhile, deep beneath the capital city, Speaker Verex entered the most secret chamber in the galaxy. Only a few leaders even knew it existed. Massive metal doors slowly opened as armed guards stepped aside. Inside the chamber rested a machine larger than a city block. Dark metal covered its surface, while blue energy pulsed through giant circular reactors. The core breaker, the council's final weapon. A weapon powerful enough to destroy entire star systems. Verex stared at the machine silently. He had hoped never to use it, because once activated, millions would die, possibly billions. But the humans had left him no choice. A scientist approached nervously. "Speaker, the weapon is unstable." Verex looked toward him coldly. "Can it destroy the human fleet?" The scientist hesitated. "Yes." "And the capital?" The scientist lowered his head. "There is a high probability the planet will also be destroyed." Silence filled the chamber. Several officers looked horrified. Destroying the capital meant sacrificing the very heart of the council itself. But Verex no longer cared. If the council could not rule the galaxy, then nobody would. Far above the planet, the final battle began. Council defense fleets rushed toward the human armada like desperate animals cornered for the last time. Thousands of plasma beams lit the darkness. Missiles crossed space in endless waves. Explosions covered the stars. Human warships answered immediately. Blue energy cannons ripped through enemy formations while strike fighters moved between larger ships with deadly speed. The battle became the largest conflict in galactic history. Entire fleets vanished inside storms of fire. Burning wreckage rained into the atmosphere below. From the planet's surface, civilians watched giant explosions flash across the sky like falling suns. Inside the Resolute, warning alarms echoed across the bridge. Enemy carriers approaching the left flank. Defense shields at 80%. Multiple boarding crafts incoming. But despite the chaos, Ethan remained calm. His eyes stayed fixed on the capital world below. Something felt wrong. Then suddenly, every screen on the bridge flashed red. An officer turned pale. "Sir, massive energy spike detected beneath the capital." Ethan's expression changed instantly. "How large?" The officer looked terrified. "Large enough to wipe out the entire fleet." The bridge fell silent. Another officer whispered softly, "My God!" Ethan immediately understood. The council had activated a superweapon, a desperate final attack. He turned sharply toward his crew. "Trace the energy source now." The tactical systems scanned the planet quickly. Seconds later, a glowing point appeared beneath the capital city, deep underground. Human officers stared at the readings in disbelief. The energy levels were beyond anything ever recorded. If that weapon fired, everything in orbit would die, including millions still trapped on the planet. Ethan made his decision immediately. Prepare ground assault teams. Several officers looked shocked. Sir, the surface defenses are still active. We don't have time, Ethan answered coldly. The weapon's energy continued rising. Outside the windows, the massive battle still raged across space. But now nothing mattered except stopping the superweapon. Ethan grabbed his combat helmet from a command table. One officer stepped forward nervously. Sir, you're going personally? Ethan looked toward him. If that weapon fires, this war ends in genocide. The bridge became silent. No one argued, because they knew he was right. Minutes later, human dropships launched from the Resolute toward the burning capital below. Enemy fire filled the skies. Buildings collapsed across the city as riots and battles spread everywhere. And deep beneath the surface, Speaker Varix prepared to destroy everything. The final moments of the war had begun, and somewhere between the collapsing galaxy and humanity's fury, the fate of every living world would soon be decided. The capital world was burning. From orbit, entire sections of the planet glowed red beneath clouds of smoke and fire. Massive explosions shook the surface, while thousands of ships fought above the atmosphere. The final battle of the galaxy had begun. Human dropships screamed through the sky toward the capital city, dodging anti-air fire and collapsing towers. Streets below were filled with chaos. Civilians ran through broken roads, while emergency sirens echoed endlessly between giant buildings. Inside one of the dropships, Admiral Ethan Cole stood silently beside his soldiers. Every human in the cabin wore black combat armor, marked with the silver symbol of Earth. Nobody spoke. They all knew the truth. If they failed today, billions would die. A young soldier finally looked toward Ethan. Sir, he asked quietly, do you think the Council will surrender? Ethan stared at the burning city outside the dropship window. No, he answered softly. Men like Varix never surrender. The soldier lowered his head silently. Moments later, the dropship shook violently as nearby explosions lit the sky. Incoming fire. The pilot pushed the ship hard between collapsing skyscrapers, while plasma blasts flashed past them. Several other human dropships exploded in the distance, but the remaining ships kept moving. No retreat, no hesitation. The humans had come too far to stop now. Deep beneath the capital city, inside the underground core breaker chamber, Speaker Varix stood before the massive machine. Blue energy flowed through giant reactors around him, while warning alarms screamed across the facility. The weapon was almost ready. Council officers nearby looked terrified. One scientist stepped forward nervously. Speaker, energy levels are becoming unstable. Varix did not turn around. How long until activation? 8 minutes. The scientist swallowed hard. If the reactor overloads, the entire planet could collapse. Varix finally looked back at him. His cold yellow eyes showed no fear anymore. Then the humans will die with us. Even the officers around him became silent. At that moment, many finally understood how broken their leader had become. This was no longer about victory. It was revenge, above the planet. The space battle continued growing worse. Human fleets pushed closer toward the capital, while desperate council forces launched wave after wave of attacks. The darkness of space burned with endless explosions. Inside the Resolute, officers tracked the core breaker's growing energy levels with rising panic. A communications officer looked up sharply. Admiral Cole's team is nearing the underground entrance. Another officer answered immediately. But enemy forces are surrounding the sector. The captain of the Resolute clenched his jaw. Then clear them out. Human warships immediately focused fire toward the city sector above the underground chamber. Precision strikes destroyed Council tanks and defense cannons, while human fighters secured landing zones below. Meanwhile, Ethan's team rushed through the ruined streets of the capital. Broken buildings towered above them like dead giants. Smoke covered the sky. Alien civilians hid behind wreckage as battles erupted across nearby districts. Some stared at the humans with fear. Others simply watched in silence. Because even now, the human soldiers ignored civilians completely. They only moved toward one target, the core breaker. Suddenly, enemy troops appeared ahead. Council soldiers opened fire instantly. Plasma blasts ripped across the street. Human soldiers quickly returned fire while taking cover behind destroyed vehicles. The battle became violent and close. Explosions shattered windows above them. Several enemy soldiers fell immediately, but more kept arriving. One human soldier beside Ethan was hit directly in the chest. He collapsed heavily onto the street. "Medic!" The wounded soldier grabbed Ethan's arm weakly. "Don't stop," he whispered painfully. "Finish this." Ethan nodded once. Then the team pushed forward again. Every second mattered now. Deep underground, warning sirens inside the Corebreaker facility became louder. The giant machine glowed brighter, with unstable energy. Scientists ran desperately between control stations trying to prevent total reactor collapse. One officer rushed toward Varex. "Speaker, human forces have breached the lower sectors." Varex remained calm. "Let them come." The officer looked horrified. "If they reach the chamber." "They won't." Varex activated the final security lockdown personally. Massive blast doors sealed across the underground facility. Defense turrets activated automatically. Combat drones filled the hallways. The Corebreaker countdown continued. 5 minutes remaining. Then suddenly, a violent explosion shook the facility. The blast doors at the far end of the chamber burst apart. Smoke filled the corridor. Human soldiers emerged through the fire, and at the front, Admiral Ethan Cole. The chamber instantly erupted into gunfire. Council guards fired desperately, while human soldiers advanced through the smoke. Defense drones exploded one after another beneath human weapons. The final battle of the war had begun inside the Corebreaker chamber itself. Varex watched Ethan approach through the chaos. "You should have stayed weak," the speaker growled. Ethan kept walking forward slowly. "You should have left humanity alone." Another explosion shook the chamber violently. The Corebreaker's energy levels climbed higher. 3 minutes remaining. Several scientists tried escaping the chamber, while soldiers continued fighting around the massive machine. Varex stepped toward the control platform. "You think humanity is righteous?" he shouted angrily. "Give humans enough power, and you become monsters too." Ethan finally stopped only meters away from him. "No," he answered quietly. "The difference is humanity remembers suffering." The chamber became silent for one brief moment. Then Varex activated the weapon manually. Red warning lights exploded across the room. Corebreaker final activation. 2 minutes remaining. Human soldiers rushed toward the controls, but defensive barriers sealed the reactor core. The machine was too far into activation. One scientist screamed in panic. "We can't stop it!" Around the chamber, fear spread instantly. Billions of lives were seconds away from ending. Then Ethan saw something hidden beneath the reactor systems. An emergency overload channel. Dangerous, unstable, possibly fatal.